I'm the manager.
I've got to look back here. I've never looked back.
That's all I can watch. Well, you look at the TVs again.
Chairman, where's the screens?
Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2.
Like boxes on there.
So, I've never actually, I've been here speaking, but you all come in through that door.
Yeah.
That's a small area.
I just sent you a text. So I get to use your mic.
But here in about
I'm getting a
3 months, we won't even be here.
Yeah, that's right.
We're moving to another building temporarily for like 3 years. You call that temporary.
Yeah, what's government's definition of temporary?
Yeah.
1 2, 1 2.
Well, our facility's not very big. Hopefully if we can build something else, we'll have room to do that. Thank you all for being here this morning. I want to recognize our county commissioners that are here with us. Joining me is Chairman Pro Tem Sarah Lopez and also Commissioner Lacey Cruz. In addition, I want to welcome Mayor Whipple, Vice Mayor Tuttle, and Councilman Johnson, who will be speaking this morning. This morning, we together unified for one reason and one cause. We will recognize the death of Sedgwick Lofton was a heartbreaking death and a tragic circumstance that occurred within our community. Our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to the family of Mr. Sedgwick Lofton. As a local government, we are accountable and transparent to our community. The county and city are here today to inform the community that we will work together to do what it takes to support, drive, and dedicate the resources needed to make sure that something that is as tragic as Sedgwick's death does not happen to any youth again. The purpose of the why we are here today is that we are policymakers. We can affect change, and we will. We will push to support youth mental health needs, policy change in our juvenile correction system, and also allocate the resources and funding that's needed from the county and the city as we learn more from our community task force that is dedicated for an end-to-end review of the circumstances of Sedgwick Lofton's death, as well as our existing youth correction systems, standards, and performance. It is imperative that as a community we work together through this tragic event. We must learn and grow from Mr. Lofton's death. We owe it to our youth to help those adolescents who are struggling to find and get help. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Lopez and the other speakers. We will be available for questions following all the comments. Thank you. Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. Last week, Glenda Martin, Sedgwick County Director of Corrections, discussed putting together a community task force that will review the circumstances around Mr. Lofton's death. I'm happy that we're able to stand this unprecedented community task force up quickly. We have over 15 community members already committed to dedicate their time to review policies and procedures for DCF and JIAC, system standards from the Kansas Department of Corrections and Law Enforcement, as well as the physical layout of our facilities. We know the work that this group is tasked with will be very challenging, and so I want to personally thank everyone who was willing to take their time to be part of the solution going forward. We, as your elected leaders, are here to support changes and improvements brought to us by this task force. Having them complete this work while we are in our budget cycle will allow us to stand up additional resources to make these necessary changes. Both the city and county are ready to work with our state partners through this process. Governor Kelly has announced that she's standing up a review of Mr. Lofton's case with DCF, and we look forward to assisting them in any way that we can. But we must do better to address the needs, or the growing mental health needs within our juvenile correction system, and we will. Sedgwick needed to get help in a crisis and should not have been in a facility that had no one on staff that's a mental health professional. Last Friday, the Department of Corrections released their video in its entirety as the first step in being transparent while we address this monumental need in our community. We want to equip DCF, law enforcement, and corrections with the resources they need to help our youth in a time of crisis, which means that we need to consider a fuller range of responses. We recognize the system is complex, but the collaboration and work of this task force will be critical to making our juvenile justice system better for our youth. I can assure you that I, as well as everybody else sitting up here today, are committed to seeing policy changes that will ensure our children get the care they need and nothing like this will happen again. Together, we will find the right path forward. Now I'd like to invite Mayor Whipple to come to the podium and speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I would also just like to point out we do have Councilmember Hoheisel with us here as well. So good morning to everyone. The city is happy to join this meeting in support of the county and their establishment of a task force to facilitate a community review of the death of Sedgwick C.J. Lawton. The death of Mr. Lawton is a horrible tragedy that has been felt by our entire community. And we are unified in our dedication to help create systematic changes that lead to less situations like the one that we have all just went through. We are further dedicated to assisting with seeking out additional mental health services within our community. The need for expanded mental health care is abundant, but it's become clear that partner agencies must work to support the county in serving the mental health needs. This week, we traveled to our state capital to begin work on a shared community legislative priorities. The support of expansion of mental health is chief among them. We cannot allow the loss of someone experiencing a mental health crisis to occur again. Now is the time to rally together and support expanded funding, services, and community support for mental health. And with that, I will pass this over to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the colleagues across the street for having me here today. I am Councilmember Johnson. The death of Sedgwick Lofton brings about a myriad of emotions for me. This is a tragedy that did not have to occur and should not have occurred. But now I know many of you watching have seen the gut-wrenching video of the last moments of this teenager's life, and it's a life that's lost too soon. We've been hearing a great deal from our community about questions that need answers and continued calls for actions and change. And I want to say today that we do, in fact, hear you. We hear you loud and clear that we need systemic changes to better serve those who we represent. This is why we're here today. My colleagues and I support the county's efforts with the establishment of the community-led task force to review the steps leading up to this tragic loss and working with the community on substantive steps to improve our collective response to those in mental health crisis. To include supporting the county, I've also been talking with our city team about taking a serious look at reviewing our own current policy regarding young people under the age of 18 experiencing a mental health crisis being taken to a place of care prior to, or preferably in place of, a corrections environment. I also want to acknowledge that we've continued to hear that a great many in our community are tired of press conferences, meetings, dialogues, and we continue to hear that policy, substantive change, and action are what needs to happen. Therefore, we are standing with our fellow electeds in support of this new task force and ready to act for the betterment of our community. We always strive to be a gold standard for our region, state, and nation. In this instance, as you could see, that did not occur. But we are committed to working toward that goal so a tragedy like this does not happen again in this city or county. We definitely hear you, and we are committed to doing better. At this time, I'd like to invite Vice Mayor Tuttle up for a few words.
Good morning. I'd also like to point out that Commissioner Pete Meitzner has joined us, so thank you for being here. The foundation of my career began as a school counselor and as an adolescent substance abuse counselor, so this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as it is many, and my heart is aching for our community and for the family. I have a commitment to mental health, and I have a long history of a career in public health, so I understand clearly that safe and healthy communities do not and will not happen by accident. This is the time that Wichita, the city, and the county should be leaning on the expertise of the mental health professionals and experts in the community to advise us on how to move forward with more support for community mental health. We support the task force, and I am dedicated to working with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition for future solutions. I hope that we can all be part of the process and the progress. The city and the county have adopted joint legislative priorities, of which mental health is a key component, highlighting our dedication in supporting the county and others in expanding mental health services. We must all look forward and work together to ensure that our community is the best that it can be for everyone, including the most vulnerable. Wichita is stronger when we are together, and we are dedicated to ensuring that our city is a place where everyone feels safe and supported. Thank you, and please reach out to me at any time. My door and my mind are always open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman. At this time, I'd like to open it up for any kind of questions that the press may have, and please address it to who you'd like to answer. Go ahead.
I guess anyone could really speak to this, or whoever's in charge of the legislative agenda, who's going up to the State House. But can you talk about the specifics that will be asked to at the State House when it comes to mental health funding? Because there's been various points talked about in this investigation and, you know, before the investigation began, that the city and the county need to address.
The nice thing about the way that we've been working together with the city, the county, the Chamber of Commerce, REAP, all of the different organizations, the number one priority that's come out this legislative session has been mental health and a number of issues involved in mental health. the largest mental health institution in the state is the Sedgwick County Jail, and we need to correct that. We need a regional mental health facility here provided by the state of Kansas. If you look at the funding that has happened over the years, the funding hasn't kept pace with what it takes in order to be able to address the problems that we've got, and we're addressing that. The workforce is not there. We need more social workers. Right now in ComCare, we're very short on social workers. So we need additional personnel that are trained and qualified to help support our community. So there's a lot that goes into this, but the nice thing about it is that each and every major organization here in this region is committed to mental health. Mayor, would you like to add anything?
Of course, and I'll just add a little bit to that. So part of our joint legislative agenda is, of course, trying to take advantage of this one-time opportunity with federal funds coming in for Sparks to see if we can be an assistant when it comes to finding a place to put a hospital. I believe a recent study showed that Kansas as a whole needs about 250 beds for mental health. And my understanding is we want at least 50 of those to be here in Wichita, and if not, we'll take all 250. However, moving forward, it's a funding issue, and I will add that on our cities, not so much the county, but our city, we did add to our legislative agenda that is aligned with the legislative agenda of the Wichita Chamber of Commerce, expanding Medicaid as well. You really can't have a conversation about mental health funding without also looking at the money that's left on the table. Part of that is going to be Medicaid expansion. We've known that over the last 10 years. I believe one of the last studies on this topic, or at least in the last article I read, talked about $800 to $1 million that we're losing in potential mental health funding right here in our region for ComCare services. So again, not only have we joined when it comes to some of these bigger items, but also the city has joined with other community organizations when it comes to just finding other avenues for folks to seek the help that they might need on their own.
Yesterday, Governor Laura Kelly did request that the Kansas Department of Children and Families conduct an investigation. This task force is obviously a step, but from the city or county perspective, do you plan on commissioning any sort of independent outside investigation as well?
I could speak to that. We really want this task force to focus in on what the county commission and the city council level can do. Anything beyond that is just, it's outside of the scope of our authority. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing is what we actually have the ability to do and change. And if we go outside of that, I worry that it could muddy the waters and we won't get as much done. So right now, we're really focusing on the policy level and going forward there.
But I'll add, we are appreciative of the governor and look forward to the results of that investigation to see if there's information within that investigation that we can utilize to help us better the system.
Sorry, one more question. I just got a text from family spokesperson who said that nobody at the task force has gotten in touch with either the family or the family's attorneys yet. Is that something that will be a part of this process?
That will really be driven by the task force. We are not giving any strict direction on what direction they want to take. We want to make sure that they're free to look at this as an end-to-end process. So we're leaving it open to the task force and the leaders of that organization.
For the city officials, what do you feel is your role in all this? Because this was a county facility where all this took place. Now, I know WPD was the one that took Lofton to JIAC. What do you view your all's position in this? Is it mostly just additional funding when it comes to mental health? Is it other policies? Where do you all see your role in this task force and kind of going forward?
You want to take it, Johnson?
Yeah, our role really is reviewing what all steps were taken by our side, WPD, what steps could be improved. Our department is already reviewing everything that happened to make some recommendations potentially in the future about what we could improve. As I also mentioned, the policy of looking at taking young people to mental health facilities rather than a correctional facility like JIAC, and how that was made. But again, not only supporting the task force, but continually trying to improve our police department and our response, because we tend to be the first point of contact in situations like this.
And then a second question was, and this can kind of go to anyone up there, is you touched on this a little bit, Councilman Johnson, but so often we hear of task force groups, things put together in light of these events, and then nothing really comes up of it, or it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Are these meetings going to be open to the public? How are we going to know that there will be some sort of accountability, that we'll see the process, that the public will see the process and be able to go ahead and be able to see what work is actually being changed?
So I can speak to the elected piece of it. I'll let Chairman Dennis and Chair Pro Tem Lopez talk about the task force. But you see the electeds here today, and I think the difference is, over the years, as an activist, I've been a part of those meetings as well, where we want to see change and we don't see everything that we want or as quick as we want. But you have a group of electeds here that are dedicated to action at this point and doing a better job of communicating out. Oftentimes, there are reforms that we just kind of do because it's right, and we don't communicate it out the best possible. So we're dedicated to doing that. You'll be hearing from us. But again, seeing us here today, working with our colleagues across the street, we are committed to making a difference this time.
And I'll just jump in before we get to the county. We have a history of making reforms, not just having meetings about reforms. We've had police reform over my very first year during the social justice discussions. We look forward to continuing to make reforms. There were reforms made thanks to our activist community who have reached out and helped us throughout the years. Now, to the question about our role in this as a city, knowing that this was a county facility, in addition to what, not Vice Mayor, excuse me, what Councilmember Johnson said, is frankly, we're here to figure out how we can be the most helpful. So I think moving forward, is there an opportunity for us to utilize joint funding on programs such as ICT-1, which we already have a joint partnership with the county on? Should we be increasing that program? Is there other opportunities for us to utilize our influence as the city to try to, like we already mentioned, bring in some of those state dollars to our region? Our goal is really to sit and learn about what happened here, where the holes are, and what is our part to make the plays to get us in a position where we want to be as a community.
And the real reason you've got these leaders sitting in front of you right now is that we have two responsibilities. First, we have the responsibility as leaders of our organizations to set policy. And so we have to review all the policies and find out what policies we may need to amend, to change, to delete, to add. So we have the ability to do that. We are a law-making organization. The second thing that is important is we also control the budget, because it doesn't matter what kind of rules and regulations or changes that we may need to make. We may need to add different cameras that have voice and so forth. Those are just some possibilities. But anything that costs money, we also have the ability to affect that in our budget. So, and the timing is perfect right now because we're just now starting our next budget cycle. So we need to make sure that the results of this task force are made known early enough that we can include it in our 2022 budget. The other thing that's important right now is the legislature is in session currently. So each and every one of us lobby the legislature for different functions. And so that is critical that these governing bodies have a number of responsibilities. And so the timing is right for all of those things to come together right now.
And these meetings will be open to the public. We are working with legal to figure out exactly what that's going to look like, but they will be open, so we are being transparent with our community. I think Commissioner Dennis hit it on the head. I mean, we're going to be in the middle of our budget cycle, so this is the time that we can really implement change, even if there's a budgetary cost associated with it. We're also creating a smaller group of electeds, which will be Commissioner Dennis, Councilmember Johnson, Hoheisel, and Fry, to meet together periodically to make sure that we're continuing to push this forward, and we're not going to let this drag on in any way, because it is so important to all of us at the city, at the county, at the state. And right now, we have a willingness to have a collaboration between all three, and that's not something we've seen before. So we really are, I believe, on the right path to seeing some long-lasting systemic change, and I'm very thankful that we have so many community partners ready to be a part of this with us.
So I understand part of this conversation is about mental health, but I also wanted to ask, are there any plans to address the prone position specifically?
Absolutely. We want this task force to look, it's going to have two different things that we're going to be asking. One is to look specifically at CJ's case and everything that goes into that. And then the other will be the larger conversation around how we can do better going forward. So it's going to be two parts to this task force, but absolutely we are going to have those conversations to see what we can do better going forward.
Thank you. I'm just curious, how are members of this task force, how are those stakeholders chosen? What would be the process for approving new or additional members? Just because that announcement came out within an hour and a half of Bennett's decision as announcement not to press charges. So it seems like it was either maybe possibly a pretty hasty decision, or somebody had heads up about the outcome. If that's not the case, I'm just curious what the process is, how it came about, just in the sake of transparency, if people could speak to that, please.
So I think regardless of what DA Bennett put out, we were going to go this path, which is why we already had a list of organizations. We've reached out to community members to see what organizations would be a good fit for this. And we wanted to make sure that we took the decision on individually who was going to be on this task force off of us. So we had staff reached out to these organizations, asked them who they would want to see on that, and that's who we've placed on this committee. So it hasn't been any of us hand-picking a person, but we have helped with the selection of the organizations and then had the organization pick out who's going to sit on the task force.
I think that helps.
And each of you should have received this one-pager that designates what the purpose of the task force is, the goals, the work that they have. It has the memberships that are identified. Also, you'll see that there are some pending confirmations. It may not be 100% all-inclusive. These are the individuals that were identified by those organizations. We did not pick these individuals. We picked organizations, and the organizations identified the people that they wanted on that task force. In addition, we want to make sure that this task force is driven by the task force, so we added some support members that can provide information on what happens from the police department, corrections, KDOC, and DCF, so that they have the experts that are available to them in order to be able to go through and make recommendations to us.
Sorry, just asking about the legislative agenda again, because I know on the city side, at least, it was passed before the DA made his decision. So is that agenda going to change a bit based off of, the policy changes that the city and the county wants to see?
I mean, it hasn't changed, or is it the same as before?
Has our legislative agenda changed since?
For the specific asks of mental health funding, so.
No, that legislative agenda was voted on and was presented to our legislative delegation. There hasn't been any further further action from the bench taken on our legislative agenda. I think when we talk about mental health, though, and as we move forward, we also want to be mindful of changing circumstances in Topeka as far as opportunities, if more opportunities present themselves, to be agile so that we might be able to take advantage of some of these funding opportunities, even if it doesn't fit perfectly into what we might have been picturing when we passed our original agenda. So no, the agenda hasn't been taken up again. However, we are still going to pursue more mental health funding and more opportunities to help folks in our community who are going through a mental health crisis.
And if you look at Sedgwick County's legislative agenda, I've been on the commission now for 5 years. Each year, behavioral health has been one of our legislative agenda items. We just haven't gotten very far with it. Hopefully this year, with some additional funding that's available from from both the legislature, because they've got some additional money from ARPA possibly that might come down. Hopefully, we can start making some of the things happen that we've been asking for a number of years.
I think I would just add to that, you know, each of us has different experiences personally with mental health. And as we are talking to our members of the legislature tomorrow and Thursday, those different experiences will come up. Some of us have personal experiences in talking about how the system as a whole works. We know that more funding is needed. We know that more beds are needed, but maybe explanations as to why and that process and how long it takes to get help and where doors are open and where they're not. Those all conversations will likely happen because a number of us have had those personal experiences and want to see change.
We've been talking about like the mental health crisis for the past several years at this point. So I guess how important is it to reach out and be in communication with these community partners to make change happen quickly?
I'd like to address that if that's okay. We do have a mental health and substance abuse coalition that is representative of non-for-profits, for-profits, community advocates, true content experts in the field of mental health, and I'm pleased that I was recently appointed to represent the city along with Councilmember Ballard on that coalition, and I anticipate really not only having this task force provide guidance, but that coalition that has developed a strategic plan. They have 3 work groups that are very active, and leaning into people who do this. I used to be a mental health professional years ago. I'm not anymore. So I don't consider myself to be a current subject matter expert, but I plan on leaning into subject matter experts within our community, as I'm sure my colleagues do as well.
And I'll just add that I believe, and Vice Mayor Tuttle could correct me, I believe we will have a workshop about this coming up in I'm bad with days. I think it's February 4th. However, it's sometime in February, if not the 4th, in which we'll be discussing not just the content experts, but also experts in policy on what can we do moving forward to achieve some of these goals. And it's something that we've been working on as well. We've been trying to integrate social work graduate students into different departments within the city, and we've had a lot of success with our friends over at Wichita State University and Newman University as well. Rather that's working with housing or working with our homeless outreach team or working with our police as well. We have been looking for creative ways to integrate more health or mental health professionals, and we are already have the intent to have a meeting with this task force, or excuse me, the advisory committee, to see what we can be doing to address this more efficiently.
And several years ago, our sheriff and our district attorney started this mental health and substance abuse coalition that hopefully, I understand in the very near future, they're going to present some interim results to an en banc committee with the city council and the county commission to see where we're at this time. But the sheriff and the DA are facing the issues every single day. As a matter of fact, early on, almost 5 years ago, the sheriff and I and a number of health professionals traveled down to San Antonio to take a look at what they are doing with the Restoration Center and Haven for Hope. And then we started talking about it, and the community started listening, and the Chamber of Commerce then had a city-to-city trip down to San Antonio about 2 years ago, I guess now. And we got the city so that they were able to take a look at what the issues are. That San Antonio is 3 times the size, so we don't need something quite as big as what San Antonio has developed, but the concept is there, and it's a great concept. I want to applaud KSN. They went down and took a look at that facility and started reporting on it. So I appreciate that the news media is even listening to what the issues are, and they're traveling down to see what we are seeing firsthand every day to see what some of the solutions might be. So hopefully with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition moving forward with the leadership of our sheriff and our district attorney, we can start affecting some change here in the future.
We'll take just a few more questions.
So it seems like there is a real commitment to making change here from hearing you all speak just in the last week with this task force. But I think the question that I have, and I think a lot of the public has, is why did it take the death of a 17-year-old to get to this point? Were there any indications of issues beforehand that just hadn't been addressed yet? But why did it take this such tragic moment to really spur all this happening now? Why couldn't this happen sooner, I guess would be what a lot of people would ask.
Well, we've been talking about behavioral health since I came on the commission, 5 years. When I was brand new on the commission, then one of the county commissioners said, hey, you need to start getting involved in what's happening with behavioral health. And so we invited a guy named Leon Evans up here to Wichita, and we had a huge conference over in St. Joseph Hospital and started talking about this. But it's to the point now, and we've been talking about funding for years, ever since I got here. The problem is the funding coming in from the state is a large portion of this issue. And that's why we've included it on our legislative agenda every year, is that we need that state support along with local support in order to be able to move forward. So the mental health is not something that just came up as a result of this tragic incident. We've been talking about that all along. But this task force has an opportunity now to take a look at the entire process for juveniles, and that's just one part of what's happening with behavioral health, as we have issues that range from homelessness to drug and alcohol abuse to the mental health issues. So those are all interrelated, and we've been talking about them for a long time. I'm just happy that the news media is listening and the community is listening so that we can make sure that we get the support so that everybody understands what we've been talking about all along. And we would love to move the needle on this.
And I think I could just add to that. For so long, it seems like all of our partners and us and everybody, we were all kind of siloed off and trying to do our own thing. It's unfortunate that it took this horrible incident, but we are all ready to collaborate in a way that we haven't seen before. So I do think that we're going to see things come of this that are really going to help us make these significant changes that I agree we've been wanting to see for a long time. So now is the time to make those changes, and we have the right partners on board to be able to get that started.
Two quick questions. One, how will this task force work from the standpoint of community input? This is a great group, but is the process going to be everybody just sits and listens, or will there be an opportunity for people of the community to speak at these meetings?
I think to start with, we are going to have our initial meeting, and we're going to ask this task force to really tell us how they want this to be ran. So we're going to wait. I don't want to give you a solid answer today, and then that changes, because we really want to leave it to this group of people and not let it be dictated by electeds. That's the one thing we're trying to stay away from is telling them how we want this done and then limiting what they can do.
I hear a lot of talk about mental health, but what actually killed CJ was the practice and for police or for detect whoever they were with him. How do we see this task force looking beyond just JIAC to policies of police practices of restraints and just police practices in general in handling confrontations? So they JIAC, or is this going to be something that might take a broader look at police practices?
We're looking at the broad look. That's why that we have task force support members from the police department, from the Department of Corrections, from KDOC, and from DCF, because each and every one of those organizations had something to do with Sedgwick. So if you look at the task force members, there are no electeds on there. There are no appointeds. All the support is on there to provide them with the information that they're seeking. We don't want to drive this. We don't want it to look like the system is driving this task force. We want the task force to drive this, and we provide them the support that they need in order to be able to make recommendations so that we can find out if we need to add it to the budget or we need to change policy.
And I'll just add, when it comes to policing, Wichita is one of 2 cities in our entire state that actually train our own officers, and we have over 40 hours of mental health training that we make every officer go through. So when it comes to reevaluating policy, if best practices and policy come forward through this task force or through other research, we'd be happy to update training and to be responsive to that. And that's part of why we want to ensure that we're helping engage and start a task force like this so that we can get that information back to us, that we, as not just the city, but also the county, can make necessary changes.
We'll take one more question. A lot of what has been talked about right now has been more long-term changes. Some of these things are going to take a long time to address. But will the task force be tasked with finding also immediate changes that can be done that will make a significant difference in the community?
So I would hope and encourage them to have both short, medium, and long-term changes. There's things, even that policy I mentioned, that's vetting everything, that could probably happen pretty quickly. But the thing is, with them, if they're looking at the global picture, they should have all of those. What can we do right now? What can we do in 6, 9 months, 12 months? What can we do down the road? They may come up with ideas that, need a lot of work, or we need to work with other systems. So hopefully it's not just limited to long-term. We'd like to see everything.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We appreciate the conversation and your questions. Have a good day.